success taught me absolutely nothing but failure. But every failure I've ever been through taught me the things that I had been looking for and didn't want to get it that way. But that's where I learned it. And so
Right.
again, fast forward, I made a decision, said I'm going to do an Ironman. And, you know, I had to start letting things go in order to do that.
Welcome to Breakthrough Mode, the podcast where we intentionally get into the driver's seat of our lives, shift out of monotony and mediocrity, and step on the gas towards becoming the person we were always meant to become. Hello and welcome to the 261st episode of Breakthrough Mode. I am your host, Megan Bauer, and today I have a treat for you. I have Scott Lackey here with me today. Scott, would you like to introduce yourself a little bit to our audience?
I would love to. And thank you for letting me be on the 261st episode. It is great to finally connect after some discussions and emails back and forth, and really look forward to talking to the audience today. And I love your topic and your theme this month of becoming and some of the things that we're going to talk about, about decluttering and habits and things that can really push us forward and being more successful. I've spent a lot of my life challenging myself, and I've been to the top of many mountains, and I've been to, unfortunately, the bottom of many valleys. And we'll probably hit on some of those things today. But, throughout my life, I've been a combat veteran in the Army. I'm a patented inventor, an Ironman triathlete, completed Ironman races. I've authored a book that's coming out in May, which I'm sure we'll talk about a little bit. Again, publicly speak locally and nationally. And so there's just been a lot of things that I've gone through in my life that I've didn't work out the way I thought they were going to work out, but have worked out. But in the end, we're going to talk a little bit about today about the gifts that I got from all that. I'd like to share with your audience because I really feel like getting to know you and watching your episodes. And that's how we connected. I was doing research and I came across your podcast. I began watching it and I thought, this is a kindred spirit right here. I, I love her podcast. We have to connect. And so we did. And again, we're here today. And so I appreciate what you do and the message you deliver to the audience. And I hope to contribute to that today. And so again, thank you for letting me be here to talk to you and your audience.
Aw, thanks, Scott. I'm glad you're here. And becoming anybody who is on the same page of becoming just gets my attention. So I love that
Mhm.
you find that importance as well. So you mentioned that you have been to the top of many mountains and the bottom of many valleys. So I recently heard a quote from one of my mentors that this triggered. He said that the higher you climb, the less room there is for nonsense. And you talk a lot in your work about sacrifice and, I would say what you have to let go of in order to continue on in that journey. And then my mentor, of course, would say you have to let go of the nonsense. What are some of those things that you've had to let go as you've climbed these mountains?
Yeah, I love that question. And I'm going to approach this answer today, since it's on my mind this week through some training I'm going through is preparing for an Ironman race. And, an Ironman race for those who don't know is it's a 2.4 mile swim. It's a 112-mile bike, and then it's a marathon, right? All in one day. Some people say all in one day. Yes, it's all in one day. One race, 140.6 miles. And if you want to become an Ironman, just to give you an example, this is not for everybody, but if you want to become an Ironman or you want to write a book or you want to, create a podcast, right? If you want to do these things, you're going to have to make a decision. You're going to have to answer a question. And the question is what are you willing to sacrifice? Right.
Mm.
Now,
Yeah.
you may not ask yourself that question directly, but you're going to have to ultimately answer that question. That was something that came to me early on in using this Ironman examples. I was answering that question every day. What am I willing to sacrifice today to achieve something that's going to be a year away, guaranteed year away to be ready to have a successful and healthy and productive race. And that meant I was going to give up television, and that meant I was going to give up watching games, and that meant I was going to give up, going to the lake. And when my wife wanted to go see her family in Texas, is that maybe I went for a couple of days and came home, or I carried the workouts with me. And I think all of that applies to anything you want to become in life. I would share with your audience is answering that question, what are you willing to sacrifice? And going back to your mentor's comment, right? elevation elevation requires an answer to that question because the air is thin the higher we go here on Earth, right? There's fewer people that want to go up there, right? There's a limited number of people that have ever attempted or actually successfully climbed Mount Everest or even other smaller mountains. And it's friction when we move higher. And so that's what I love about the question, what are you willing to sacrifice? Because if you'll answer that, I'll tell you if you'll share the answer, not you personally, but other people. If you'll tell me what you're willing to sacrifice, then you're going to be telling me how far you're willing to go to achieve whatever it is that you're trying to become.
That's pretty powerful. I feel like sometimes we don't make that connection. How do you, when somebody says they'll probably the knee jerk reaction is like, oh, I'll do whatever it takes. I feel like sometimes that's the knee jerk reaction, but then they come up against these situations or circumstances in which they're not willing to sacrifice. How do people come to that awareness where they're not willing to sacrifice what is required?
Yeah. So again, I'm not going to be the first person to say this, I don't think, right? But the second that we as human beings decide we're going to do something bold or something audacious, resistance is going to start the minute you speak the words. It'll show up somewhere.
Mhm.
Resistance loves to show up when you decide to move away from where you're physically at, right? And it most commonly shows up in family members and friends because you're doing something different that's outside the norm. And that's when the pull starts. And, I love my family and I love my friends and neighbors, but some of the people that I have associated with in my life were not meant to be on the journey with me. They weren't meant to go with me. And so, that resistance to some degree is an indication that you are moving out of that safe space, that comfort zone when you feel the resistance. And so, again, when there's no pain, there's no friction, and we say, I want to do this, I don't doubt you want to do it. But I'm going to go back to what I started out with is, okay, if that's what you want to do, now write down on a piece of paper, what is it exactly that you're willing to sacrifice? A lot of people like to tell us, write your goal down, right?
Mhm.
Write it down. If you can't write it down, you can't define it. It's not a goal. I don't disagree with that. Do that. But the second thing is start writing down again the things you're willing to sacrifice. What time are you willing to sacrifice? How about start answering some of the questions of when you're, going back to the Ironman example. I didn't even tell my family I started training for an Ironman, right? And I went several weeks before finally at dinner one night they said, you sure have been working out a lot. And at dinner table, I finally said, okay, I'm going to level with everybody. I'm training for an Ironman. Oh, that changed the temperature of the room, right? My wife's like, you're crazy. What is that anyway? You know,
That's
right?
funny.
But yeah, it is. But then again, I don't want to get too far off of your point. But when you realize and start experiencing that resistance, that would be my very next question. I would encourage the audience to ask themselves is not to be redundant, but it's so important that we understand what is it that I'm willing to sacrifice. I have to believe that when you started your very first podcast, right? Maybe it wasn't the first, the second, or third, and maybe it was before the first podcast. You ultimately had the answer. What am I willing to sacrifice? And I will say this: I think for someone like yourself who is introspective, right? I
Yeah.
think that I think that you one of the things that again you may not have knowingly said this, but one of the things I feel like you had to say to yourself is, I'm willing to sacrifice a part of myself and be vulnerable, right? And that is a sacrifice to do that because when you expose yourself, you're being transparent, you're being who you are, who you meant to be. And some people take advantage of that. And that's going to happen to your audience, whether they start a podcast or do an Ironman, they're going to have to be vulnerable and tell the truth and be honest with themselves. And when those things happen, that can create its own pain. It has nothing to do with anybody else. It's an internal pain.
Is it in that resistance that we discover what it is we need to sacrifice?
I think it's twofold again. Yes, it's in the resistance after you've made the decision. But I think the second part of it is I think if we're honest with ourselves, most people know what they're not doing and what they should be doing. I think people know that, right? And so I think part of it is not going out and finding something to do or looking for something new. It's being honest with yourself and doing the things that you know you're supposed to be doing, but you refuse to do it.
That can be a powerful moment and really hard to look at, to be honest. When we say, we're trying to do this or we want to do this, that can be a hard moment to look at what we're refusing to do to get whatever it is we said we want to do.
Maybe a simpler way of saying it is that, you're not going to discover who you're meant to be or what you're supposed to do by imagining it or designing it or visualizing it. I'm not saying those things are bad. Do those things. But in my experience, becoming something different was more about removing what wasn't true and paying more attention to what remained.
That's that's really interesting. Removing what wasn't true. How do you know what's not true?
Great question. Great follow-up question, right? So, I'm going to again using myself as an example, right? Leading up to the decision to do an Ironman race, since I started with that, it was during COVID. Absolutely was nothing was wrong. Traveling was great, weather was great. I was working from home, walking with my wife at lunch, right? Family was great. Everything was great. We had an uneventful COVID shutdown, if you will, in our neighborhood. Neighbors were coming out and talking to each other. And then out of nowhere, here's that voice in my head that's saying, basically, I shouldn't say saying, this feeling I had that was something was just not right. Something wasn't right. Something was wrong. And I'm going to fast forward, but that question kept getting louder and louder during COVID, and nothing was wrong. And it was starting to get me very aggravated of why did I feel like something was wrong? And ultimately, again, fast forwarding, this these two words came to my mind, and the two words were broken promises. And so I started again looking at that introspectively. Well, what broken promises? What are you talking about? And it was broken promises just over periods of time, not any short period of time, long periods of time, promises that I'd made to myself of things that I was going to do that I never did. But I promised myself I was going to do those things.
Ooh, that gave me
Right.
chills.
Right. And again, I kept internally examining that. Right. And it's not that the Iron Man was the one big broken promise. It wasn't that at all. It was, looking inward and taking an assessment of what those things were. And I decided that one of the things that I was not doing that I needed to do was challenging myself in some way, right, to learn more about who I am, right, through those challenges, through the adversity. I think I mentioned to you before, right? Success taught me absolutely nothing but failure. But every failure I've ever been through taught me the things that I had been looking for and didn't want to get it that way. But that's why I learned it. And so
Right.
again, fast forward, I made a decision. I said, I'm going to do an Ironman. And, you know, I had to start letting things go, right, in order to do that. And I hope that answers your question. But that's where that's where that's where it really started in the most recent story example.
Right. So you looked at these things that you said that you wanted to do that you weren't currently acting on, and kind of instead of just adding things on, like, okay, well, I'm just going to add this in, you looked at where am I not in alignment with being that version of myself, and what do I need to let go of so that I can step into it? Is that right?
Yeah, again, it's a fair statement, and it wasn't one specific thing. It was I would describe it more as a pattern. I think that's honestly, I feel like that's got to be true for the audience, right?
Oh,
If
absolutely.
yeah, so something I think we had talked about before, right? If change begins, what was it? If change begins in places we avoid, okay, well then what were you avoiding, right? That's kind of what you said earlier, and so it wasn't one thing; it was a pattern, and not to oversimplify it, but the broken promises. I was just avoiding the truth, right? Avoiding what I should be doing. So on the surface, I mean, I would do little things. It was like kicking up dust. It looked like discipline. I would achieve certain things, but, at the office or with family or friends or just little things, but man, underneath, I was like, "That's just empty. It's just a shell," right? Went back to that no more broken promises. And and I guess I would just add that a couple of examples is one of the things that I had to shed or get rid of, this is no shocker, is that other people's opinions matter, right?
Right.
That was one of the reasons why I didn't want to tell anybody that I did an Ironman because I didn't want their opinion.
Yep.
I love my
Yeah.
family, but I didn't want your opinion. This is what I'm going to do, right? Another one, again, not in that period of time, but if I think back in history, there was a period in time in my life where possessions and places were very important to me because I wanted other people to know that I had those possessions and I had been to those places because if
Mhm.
they knew, surely they would think I'm important. And it
Right.
was important to me that they thought I was important, right?
Right.
So I'll give you again, not that that was related to the Ironman, but at a time in my life when I shed that, when I discarded that, what a powerful place to be when it doesn't matter anymore.
Right. That is an extremely powerful place when you're just like, actually, I'm pretty neutral about this. I'm just going to do what I feel I need to do. And because the tricky thing is that people are going to judge you no matter what. They're going to judge you if you have the thing, and they're going to judge you if you don't have the thing, or if you go to the place, or if you don't go to the place. Like there's literally no winning. But when you're stuck in that space in yourself where those things, the opinions of others or the judgments or criticisms matter, it feels it feels important. But when you can let it go, you're just like, "Oh, now I'm so much more free to act."
Yeah, it's a freedom it's hard to describe. There has to be people, that listen to the podcast that are doing things, talking to people, and it's very important to them. It carries a weight,
Right.
right? That certain people in their lives acknowledge what they're doing.
Right.
And one of the challenges I put forth in my book is again, I won't go too deep into it, but one of the challenges I put in the book is pick a day or a week, depending on how long you can do this, and have your normal life. But when you're talking to people, avoid invoking anything about yourself into a conversation whatsoever. Don't invoke, oh, I've done that. Oh, I've been there. Oh, did you see my watch? Oh, this weekend we're going to go do this. We're going to go to this place, that place. We're going to dinner. No, I've watched this show. No, nothing. Invoke nothing. Just dig into whoever it is that you're talking to, wife, spouse, son, daughter, aunt, uncle, mom, best friend, colleagues, whatever. Ask them about themselves. Watch how much they talk about themselves. What'd you do this weekend? How did you feel about that? Right? Don't invoke anything. And it is an extremely painful thing. This is if you want to know if how bad you are at not invoking yourself in other people's lives, just do that for one day. It's almost impossible. And I practice that even today. And one of the gifts that I get out of that is one, disciplining myself to start invoking my garbage into other people's life, right? Because
Mhm.
but the other thing is it's actually brought my relationships much better with other people. I've learned things about them. I've had understandings about them that have actually made our relationships better. There were times in my life I was so busy talking to them about what I was doing, I couldn't hear what they were saying.
Right.
So when you flip that coin, that's and again that's another process of creating your own friction to learn more about yourself.
Yeah, that's illuminating. So if somebody were to go on this journey of, you know, sacrificing things about who they currently are so that they can step into who they want to become, where would you tell them to start? Like what's the, play areas of biggest impact, if you will?
Yeah, this is probably going to be a little counterintuitive. When people ask the question of where to start, I feel like most people say, it's out there, right? whatever it is that you want to do, it's in front of you, it's around the next curve, it's over the next hill, it's the extra whatever, right? I just happen to believe the I guess the opposite of that, which is, and I said this recently in a speech that I gave. I think what I'm looking for, you're looking for, listeners are looking for, what that thing that we think we're looking for. It's not in another possession. It's not in another place. It's not another relationship. It's not in any distance that you can travel. It's none of those things. The things that you're looking for to fulfill you are exactly where you're standing right now. What that means is that you need to turn from getting your answers from the outside and you start looking for those answers on the inside. That's your starting place. It's not gaining more. It's not going anywhere. It's
Mhm.
turning and looking inside, right? I just published a story the other day, a week ago, 2 weeks ago. And what I found interesting when I was writing this was somewhat mindful, I guess you will, to me, but it was that most people aren't struggling to know what to let go of. They struggle to admit it. You see that you understand the difference with
Mm.
that?
Yeah, I do. Because
Yeah.
that's the truth, like, we know we have habits that aren't serving us. We know we have thought patterns that aren't serving us. We know that we go to places and chat with people and eat things that aren't serving us. But we refuse to acknowledge it because once we acknowledge it, then we're responsible to have to do something about it or admit to ourselves that we're not going to.
You literally just summarized it beautifully.
I think it's that responsibility portion that we're afraid of. We don't want to be responsible for it. As long as I don't know how to publish a podcast, I can't publish a podcast,
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
So, um,
And I hope that resonates again with the listeners is there are so many we've all seen the books that are out there. They're everywhere, right? The 7 habits to do this, the 6 of these, the 9 of these, and I'm not saying you shouldn't read those. Maybe you can get some golden nuggets out of those books. That's fine. But I just strongly believe and share that if we do what you and I are talking about, is if the things that you refuse to admit, you might want to start there,
I
right?
think that's a great place to start. That is a great place to start. And speaking of books, what makes your book different? Tell us what you've titled it and what makes it different from the all of the 101 ways to be awesome.
I'm going to use that somewhere. Thank you for that.
You're
Yeah, the,
welcome.
the title of the book is actually the title. This is a little provocative, right? Is "Wake Up to Die Again," and the subtitle is "Breaking Who You Became, So You Can Be Who You're Meant to Be." That's a very inward focused statement, right?
Mhm.
And there may be listeners on here right now. I'm going to describe the left hand, if you will, or one side of my audience. There are people, Megan, that you and I have met in our life, or we know of, that wake up every day just to die again because they're not living life. They're miserable.
Yeah.
And so the book speaks to that audience, right? But there's another audience that is seeking self improvement, and many of the people in your office, and they want to learn how to become, or in this case, they want to declutter their minds, or whatever the case may be. But they wake up every day willing to sacrifice something about themselves to become who they're supposed to be. Two different extremes,
Right.
right? Same sentence, two different extremes. So what I've learned from my beta readers, I've had many beta readers that have read it and taught me a lot about what I wrote because right the reader has its own interpretation, right? And they've taught me a lot. And so one of my beta readers said on the left side, if you will, this waking up to die again, miserable. I hadn't seen him in maybe 15 years, and he read the book, and he about 6 chapters in, he sent me a text message, and he says, "Hey, Scott, I know you've asked me to help you." He said, "But I've had to set the book down. There's a lot going on in my life right now, and you've had me laughing and crying through the first 6 chapters, and I've just gotta put this down and process it," you know? And that was a gift, right? For me, because it touched something in someone I'd not seen for 10 years who was willing to read it, and it was actually helping him, right?
Right.
and vice versa. I've had some people, if you will, on the other extreme, read the book that are doing wonderful in their lives, have great relationships, challenging themselves in various ways, and made some comments about the same thing about I went through this worksheet or went through these questions, and I've made a decision. I'm not going to deny this thing in my life anymore. I'm going to turn and I'm going to address that. So it's caused them to do what we've talked about on your podcast of admit something, turn and face that, and then admit that something needs to be done. And these are the steps I'm going to take to do that. And so, not that I'm going to solve it for them, I'm not going to solve it for them. That is what's different about the book, right? My book
Mhm.
is very vulnerable, very transparent, very honest. And everybody that has read it, everybody has told me, wow, I saw myself in that book. My circumstances were different. My journey was different, but you made me see some things in my life that I didn't realize I could do this or I could do that. You'll not find one thing in my book in 24 chapters that tells you to do A, B, C, D, or X, Y, not one time. I'm simply going to lay my story out there and explain in great detail what I did, where I came from, where I went, how deep it was, or how high it was, and provide a mirror for you to look at and say, if you see yourself in this, what say you? What are you going to do? And I
Yeah.
hope, and I even say this in the book, I really hope that in your own life, in your own way, you get to the other side of yourself. Because if you will, you're going to have a new relationship with your family, your children, your friends, your neighbors. You're going to be a different person. And I also say this, and I believe this: our neighborhoods need this, our homes need this, our families need this. We need to get to the other side of ourselves.
Right. And well, in addition to having a different relationship with all of those that you listed, you'll have a different relationship with yourself. Because what would it be like to wake up and like just automatically have a good relationship with yourself? Be like, I
Yep,
did good today, or like I'm
100%.
excited for today. I'm just so jazzed to be me. Who
Yep.
who
It,
who does that?
who
It
does that?
sounds egotistical, but wouldn't that be a great way to live instead of being like, oh, I can't believe, my hair looks like this or blah blah blah.
It,
We instantly criticize ourselves when we could have this better improved relationship with ourselves.
no one's a better critic of us than us, right? And that's actually the premise of the book. Is that the premise is ultimately is that it all starts with us. It's not the world. It's
Yeah.
not your neighborhood. It's you,
Right.
right? Or me. And so when we get to the other side of ourselves, the benefits that we get are all of those different, people that I named, but it
Right.
starts with us. I think it was my pastor that actually said this. Let's see if I can, hopefully I don't butcher this. He said he'll ask people some question about how things are going in their lives and what challenges they see. And he basically says he knows that if they say, "Oh, it's this, it's that, it's this person, when it's everything, it's outward." He's like, "Oh, this is going to be a long conversation," right? But
Yep.
when he's talking to people that say, "I've thought a lot about it, and I may not agree with all these things, but I think I'm a contributor to the problem." He said, "Oh, this is going to be a short conversation." You know,
Yeah. When we could recognize our own contribution, then we can recognize our own power, and then we can recognize that we have something to do that we can do about it.
that's
That
right.
can put us in a place of action or acknowledged refusal.
Yep, yep. More succinctly said than I did, but I think that's what I think. I think that's what people are going to enjoy about the book is that it is a lived experience. And again, I can only tell you what my beta readers have told me. Many people have said they had to set the book down and think about some of the things because there's some powerful stories in there.
Absolutely. That's great. Well, I will have a link to your website, which people can get your book at once it's available. I don't think it's out yet, right?
Nope,
Coming
couple
out
well,
soon.
see, 3 more weeks. We were just finishing up, um, some final touches, and there's some other podcasts that are timing, wise that are gonna go out simultaneous. It's a big coordination event that I'm learning about but somewhere between, I'd say, May the 1st and May the 15th, so
All right. Well, right now there's an inner circle that people can sign up for so that they know when it's out. All right. I've got one last question for you if you're willing to be vulnerable again with everyone. What are you working on sacrificing right now?
ooh, great question. So, you know, the short answer is me, okay? The short answer is me. But let me obviously expound on that because it won't make sense just saying me. What is it I'm sacrificing about myself? When when I wrote the book, I refused to start on it until I could fully accept that I was going to have to be transparent and vulnerable to tell the stories. Okay. People have asked me, why now? Why'd you write the book now? What changed? And the answer to that question was the book was actually ready for a long time, but I wasn't. So when we talk about what am I going to sacrifice now, I feel like that the audience, your audience, the world, uh, they're screaming for people like Megan, and I hope for me, who are being authentic, right? And I really mean that sincerely. We're screaming for authenticity. We've never been as a society more connected than we are right now and more disconnected at the same time. But when you have authentic conversations, right, and challenge other people in a nice and conversational and reasonable way, that comes across. People know when you're being authentic. They know when you're being transparent, right? It's like the Bible talks about the fruits of the Spirit. I love the fruits of the Spirit. You'll know them by their fruit, right? And I love that just from a conversational piece. And so that's what I'm sacrificing right now and getting ready for the launch of this book is that when I turn it over to the world, there are actually people that know me. They're going to read this and go, I never knew that about him. And you know what I hope is? I hope it destroys some idea they had about me that I did this or I did that. Anything that if there's anything that they ever thought about me that put me on a pedestal, I hope it just crushes that pedestal.
Yeah.
Right. And so that they actually get to see the real me. Right.
Right.
And also from the standpoint of, my kids, there are things that they've heard bits and pieces of the stories, and they're going to read this in its entirety, and they're almost through it, but they're going to read this and they're going to say, wow, I didn't know any of this about my dad. And I think that's a really special place to be to bring your family together closer. It's helped our communication. Anyway, that's really what I'm going through right now. Is I'm answering the question, what are you willing to sacrifice again? And the answer is myself. And and I find that I say this in the book that the more of my I'll leave this with your listeners. The more of myself I'm willing to sacrifice, the more of myself I actually find.
Ooh, that's counterintuitive, but it's true because when we sacrifice our time to help or to serve or to whatever, we generally leave with more than what we've sacrificed energetically, emotionally, relationship wise, whatever it is.
Yep,
So
it
there's,
is soul filling, as they say.
yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on Breakthrough Mode, Scott. I am so glad that you reached out. In the show notes, everyone, you can find a link to Scott's website so you can go get in on his inner circle and find out when his book comes out so you can grab a copy. And that's what we have for you today. Thanks for joining us. I totally love you. Bye for now.